Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be sailing out in the Tier 6 Japanese destroyer known as the Fubuki, in a Tier 6 domination game on the map Trident. We're joined by our two good friends Ben and Zeron, both in Tier 6 premium cruisers, Ben in the Graf Spee, Zeron in the Molotov. The focus of today's gameplay is going to be on my overall usage of the Fubuki and in a way my initial thoughts of how Japanese destroyers can be implemented in the mid tiers at best. Reason being, a number of you have sent in messages and comments asking me to take a look at Japanese destroyers from say tier 5 upwards and try to articulate, in my experience, how they fit into the overall destroyer meta of World of Warships now, especially after the split of the Japanese destroyer line into the gunboat line, which extends up to tier 8, and the torpedo boat line, which goes all the way up to tier 10, the Fubuki being in the torpedo line. Reason being, a number of you are now finding that these ships cannot just be used as torpedo boats, or if you do use them in that way, the games become very frustrating and these ships seem overexposed to their Russian and American counterparts in particular. Now straight away I am going to throw in a disclaimer here in the fact that all the destroyers in this match are all Japanese. Matchmaking was very kind, so as a result we're not going to see any international destroyer on destroyer action. But what you are going to see, or at least I hope to show you, is how the Fubuki, and Japanese destroyers in particular, are greater than just their torpedoes, i.e. the ship is worth more when you consider it as a whole. Now we'll start off by taking a look at our gradual move towards Alpha and how we're going to use our torpedoes throughout this match. The idea being the torpedoes on the ship are very powerful in theory. A 10km range, maximum damage of 16,267, a 59 knot top speed which is mediocre. You've got a 76-second reload on 3 triple tubes, which means you've got a lot of torpedoes to chug out, and on top of that you've got quite a good reload, and that's the base reload by the way. We don't have the torpedo reload skill equipped to this ship. And that's pretty much about it for the torpedoes with regards to their statistics. And you may be thinking right now, okay, so you're going to throw your torpedoes across Alpha, but why are you going to choose a wide spread rather than a tight spread? The reason being because I don't really care if I hit my opponents with the torpedoes, not this early on anyway, because I just want to zone my opponents for now, especially in domination games. I want to be able to use my torpedoes to force my opponents to go in directions which are going to be beneficial for our team. For example, the enemy team pushed quite aggressively towards Alpha, but the enemy Budioni in particular that's overextending onto Alpha may have to slow down or turn away to dodge the torpedoes as they cut across their bow. This may leave the Budioni in a position whereby my friends, i.e. Z and Ben in particular, can citadel it. Alternatively, another one of our destroyers can then challenge in and get in a close range torpedo barrage. And that's the idea. Try and split up the enemy formation or put enemy ships in awkward positions. And speaking of an awkward position, this is going to get very awkward for the enemy Fubuki as we now try to contest Bravo. We're a little bit late in capturing it, but instead as our torpedoes almost finish reloading, we're going to make the enemy Fubuki regret they tried to defend Bravo. Logic being here, we're going to toss all of our torpedoes into the smokescreen they created, as the Fubuki now comes around and tries to use it to get some cheeky shots off on us, or at least provide spotting for their teammates it would seem for now. We opened fire with our guns and we scored 4 direct hits, doing a good amount of damage as we throw our torpedoes on a widespread towards the smokescreen. Now note, when we hit the Fubuki with our guns we picked up an incapacitation, and we're going to assume that was their engine incapacitated. And knowing priority target, we've got one enemy ship focusing us at the moment, we decide to kick up our smoke. That means now as we turn our aft towards where the Fubuki was last spotted in case they tried to torpedo our smoke, that the enemy Fubuki will not have a repair. And when the torpedo left of our barrage hits them, as you're about to see, there it is. That enemy Fubuki's flooding is not going to be removed. And that means the enemy Fubuki who has torpedoed this smokescreen, we're going to assume, is going to flood to death. And our premonition about the enemy torpedoes coming in is going to ring true very shortly as we kick in the reverse gear. And there they are, so we're just going to reverse through the enemy torpedoes now. And that Fubuki's going to drown. There we go. Now note how our widespread torpedoes, they were fortunate to hit the enemy Fubuki, we could say. If we'd gone for a tight spread, we may have missed entirely. That's the way things go. But what we can also say is the enemy Warspite Texas combination would not have wanted to turn in knowing that we were on the objective and we would have been chucking out torpedoes towards the smokescreen. So straight away we can think psychologically we are zoning the enemy team, and we're going to do it again here against the Texas Warspite combo. We're throwing our torpedoes towards the Warspite on our lead indicator, but if we hit the Texas or the Warspite, we don't really care. If we miss them entirely, we don't mind. So long as it causes the enemy team to think, I don't want to go towards Bravo, I don't want to go towards Charlie because there's torpedoes being rained towards me. That's what we're thinking. So moving away from the torpedo discussion, let's talk about the guns, because we're now going to switch to them for a good chunk of this game. Well, you've got two twin 127mm batteries, one mounted on the bow, one mounted aft. They have a range of 10 kilometers, just like your torpedoes. It's quite a nice parallel. When you fire these guns, your detectability goes from your base of 6.8 kilometers out to 10.6 kilometers, which is why I'm strongly considering a concealment expert advanced firing training build to see how this ship handles as a stealth firing destroyer. But that's for another time. We'll talk about that in a future video as we pick up a torpedo hit on the Texas and cause some flooding as well, which won't go away straight away, so we're going to accrete some nice damage here. And in fact, that Texas's flooding is actually going to cost them their life, because they will not be able to manoeuvre out the way of our friendly Congo, which is sitting behind us at the moment, who is aiming in a nice salvo on that Texas. But coming back to the guns, on top of the overall range, the high explosive is very powerful against enemy destroyers and light cruisers, whereby it has a maximum damage of 1,800 and a 9% fire chance, meaning we can even toss some against the enemy battleships and hope to pick up a fire. Much like we would in, say, the Russian counterpart of this ship, the Ognavoy, where it's 8% base fire chance or 10% with Demolition Expert, so we can see how we're mirroring our guns to be like a Russian destroyer here. With your armour piercing, you have a maximum damage upon Citadel of 2,200, but the problem with the armour piercing is it doesn't have that much penetration power unless you get, say, 5 kilometers from an enemy cruiser, where it can penetrate the likes of your Russian counterpart, I believe that's the Budioni, and you can pick up citadels on a broadside, although I wouldn't recommend going out your way to do so, because when you think about it, the Fubuki is going to get ripped to pieces by return high explosive, seeing as it's only got 6 to 16mm of armour, and the modules on the ship become incapacitated very quickly, as this enemy Hatsuhara is going to show. The first salvo we take off their bow mounted turret, we end up being set on fire, and I think the second salvo knocks out our engine. No, perhaps it's the third salvo, as we knocked out their engine our second salvo, and our third salvo goes amiss. There we go, there goes our engine in the third salvo, and we're taking a number of hits here. Now, let's come around to one final point on the guns, and that is the muzzle velocity of 915 meters per second for both shell types, which is quite nice. It means that you can get used to the lead characteristics of these guns, even out to their maximum distance, very easily. But let's talk about that situation there where it appeared as though we overextended. It could be said we made a misplay, but note how our torpedoes have forced the enemy Leander to pull back in order to dodge them, and on top of that, it may be the case we've actually made the enemy Warspite Koenig combination behind the enemy Leander from our perspective to think we don't want to go forward if that Fubuki's throwing 10km torpedoes towards us. That overextend was very dangerous because we lost over half of our health. But notice how we prepared ourselves to get back towards our teammates, i.e. the Alba off to our right hand side and the battleship behind us and another cruiser south of us. We made sure not to be too far away, and we had our speed boost ready in order to run from the enemy Hatsuhara. And now with the enemy fleet distributed and spread, i.e. the Hatsuhara is now by itself most likely heading on to Bravo behind the rock in front of us, that means we can now be a little bit more aggressive again and pick up the pace. Because we split the enemy fleet, the enemy destroyers are not going to get covered, and now we're going to bait the enemy destroyers to make a very big misplay, or at least the Hatsuhara. We throw off one salvo and we get targeted by them, which means they're probably going to fire, so we kick up our smoke. As we do so, the enemy Hatsuhara fires and picks up a light amount of damage on us, but more importantly, they fired their guns, and that means that Ben is going to be able to spot them in his grab spay north of them. Alternatively, our cruisers south of us will do the job, which means the enemy Hatsuhara now is in a really bad spot as we've just taken out their engine. They're going to repair it, but we can keep throwing in the shells from the cover of our smoke screen. And that means they're never going to get the objective just by themselves. The Mizuki, who's been more sensible and keeping their guns silent, will get the objective. But it slows down the enemy team's progress, and we decide to charge out of our smoke now because we know torpedoes are on their way, and they're from the enemy Mizuki if I remember correctly. We dodge the torpedoes, getting used to that 2.5 second rudder shift. It's an absolute pleasure to have. And that's without a rudder shift upgrade. And with the enemy Hatsuhara now beaten to death pretty much, we're also picking up some damage on them through our fire that we set on them. We're chucking in some shells towards the enemy Mizuki. We managed to capture Bravo in the end. And we're throwing some torpedoes towards them as well, just to prevent them from charging towards us. They're obviously going to turn broadside in the end to dodge them, but we can pick up some nice damage on their broadside, knocking out their engine there with 2 high explosive shells. We've thrown another salvo after that 8-second reload, which really is painful, but you have to get used to it. But that enemy Mizuki is pretty much crippled now as they try to run away. And as you're going to see very shortly, we're getting to a less effective range, even with our maximum dispersion of 83 meters. We're getting to a range whereby a small target is going to be very hard to hit, so as a result we decide to pull back. And whilst the enemy warspite is detecting us, we're just going to throw in some shots because they're not targeting us. They're very focused on our Bayern, which is off to what would be our port side. As we set a fire on the warspite, and that's going to build up some damage. So that 9% fire chance for Demolition Expert coming into full effect here. We're going to beach accidentally here. We do cut our speed. That's a bit of a misplay on my part, but fortunately for us that warspite is so heavily focused on the on the Bayern, and this goes to show in effect how by playing closer to the fleet we survive for longer, because we can rely on our teammates to soak up the attention. i.e. the warspite won't kill the battleship they're going up against as they lose a lot more health. And finally the Bayern finishes them off. So now reversing off of the landmass, Ben's very quickly going to come around. We're talking via TeamSpeak at this point. He's going to come around to capture B with myself. We're going to push into the objective at the same time, as one of our teammates is a little bit obnoxious in my personal opinion and tries to tell Ben how to capture an objective, to which Ben comes with a very witty response. But enough of that. The game is pretty much ours, so we're just going to try and milk out a little bit more experience for ourselves. What else can we say about the Fubuki? Well, one thing I am wary of is the fact that this ship only has a maximum speed of 35 knots without speed flags or a speed boost. The problem with that is the fact that you can't overextend against enemy destroyers, and it means your capability to go deep into enemy lines all relies on you not being spotted. Now, we don't have a concealment expert build here. We've only got a 9-point captain. We're working towards concealment expert with our 10th point. So as a result, if we do get caught out in the open by the likes of a Farragut or an Ognavoy, we will be chased down and ripped to pieces in the long haul. And that is why I prefer to try and keep close to the fleet, or at least flip between the fleet, and as we saw when we played on Bravo, by ourselves, we weren't exactly extending into the enemy's half of the map. We could have pulled away if needs be. And one important thing to note, I guess, and the reason why we would go and take Bravo from the outset. Think of it this way, if we took Alpha or Charlie, our torpedoes and our overall gun batteries would have had their effectiveness minimised somewhat. Not because of the local terrain or anything along those lines, but when you go out towards the side of a map, you create lanes for yourself and your destroyer, whereby your torpedoes can only be fired down certain lanes, and the shorter the range of your torpedoes, the more limited your coverage is, of course. You go into the middle of the map, you can fire your torpedoes 360 degrees around you in theory, and as a result you have 360 degree coverage of all possible approaches of the enemy team throughout the match. That's why we wanted to contest the middle, to provide us with the greatest opportunity to do damage and be able to shoot our foes. And we can see by pushing through the middle once again, we can quickly engage this Albert and pick up some very light scratching damage, just hitting over the 50,000 damage mark, which is what we wanted. We land one more hit. We're using our speed boost to charge towards Charlie. We're going to come up through the south and hopefully get the Alba on a broadside to use some armour piercing, just experiment with that against the Japanese cruiser. It's only them and the battleship left, the enemy battleships all the way down in the southern portion of the map, eyeing grid square what would be J5. So we're just charging up towards the Alba. We've got nothing to worry about at this point, as our Koenig does a brilliant dodge on the Alba's torpedoes and tries to finish them off, picking up a good amount of damage. Ben's also throwing in some battery fire from his 283mm batteries on the grass bay. There goes some more high explosive, picking up a couple of hits. Only one actually doing any damage. We get the armour piercing ready, but as we can see, our teammates finish off the Alba before it can land. A little bit unfortunate, that would have been interesting to see what it would have done. But as we creep our way into Charlie, we're now going to capture it, and that is pretty much the game over with. So I guess any other questions or last bits I want to bring up very quickly. The only thing you have to get used to is the fact that guns rotate at a very slow rate on this ship. So as a result, using it as a gunboat, you need to think ahead, as if you're in a way playing a heavy cruiser or a battleship, because you turn 180 degrees in your turrets through 30 seconds. That's not a great time period compared to the very first turn rates on your American counterpart, the Farragut, for example. So you have to be intelligent about where you're going to point your guns next, which is why you'll see I'm constantly changing my gun directions well in advance, so that way I'm ready. But with that, that's the game over. Let's take a look at the post-game stats. A rather comfortable victory in the end. We received 260,822 silver credits and 3,507 experience for our efforts. We also picked up the achievement Devastating Strike for destroying an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo, or aircraft by causing damage to over 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool. That was on the enemy Fubuki in this instance. In terms of our battle performance, we racked up 50,829 HP of damage, consisting of 41 target hits with our main batteries, 2 torpedo hits, 5 incapacitations, 1 enemy ship destroyed, 2 fires set, 2 floods caused, 4 base defends, 1 base captured, and 2 assisted captures. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we came first in our team in terms of base experience earned, 1,798. Not by a huge margin over our team, and by no means did we carry our team. If anything, the reason we came top was because of our objective-based mindset. Note how we tried to control Bravo or the regions around Bravo wherever possible, solo capping it early on and then coming back to recapture it with Ben's assistance towards the end of the game. And then we picked up the cheeky capture on C as a freebie right at the end. But also note how in general we were always amongst our team or in a position where we could interfere and assist our teammates in getting the upper hand over the enemy fleet, whether it be using our torpedoes to disrupt enemy formations, alternatively just providing another ship for the enemy team to shoot at, returning fire of our own main batteries. Looking at our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here. The first is in terms of the split of our damage caused, whereby we can attribute it in equal thirds approximately across main battery damage, torpedo damage, and other damage. This goes to echo something I've said time and time again on this channel, and it seems to ring true in Japanese destroyers in particular, that destroyers are not just about one piece of armament, whether it be your main batteries or your torpedoes, but combining them together to get the maximum overall effective output. And I think if you can focus on that in Japanese destroyers, it will bode you very well. The other item to note is our objective-based nature, being echoed in the fact that we picked up approximately half of our team's capture points, 113 out of 240, and we picked up all of our team's base defend points, 31 out of 31. Finally, coming on to our credits and experience, we can see that after deductions we walked away with 227,902 silver credits. In conclusion, hopefully today, despite the favourable matchmaking we received, we have demonstrated how the Fubuki can be used in a supportive manner as well as an aggressive one, whereby your typical aggression in a Japanese destroyer of getting behind enemy lines, using your stealthy nature and your very powerful torpedoes to wreak havoc on the enemy fleet will take you so far. But you also need to be aware of the fact there is an objective to be played and you do have teammates who are going to need your support. And by playing around our team and every so often making an incursion into enemy lines, we seem to pick up a very nice game and a good amount of damage. It's all about striking a balance in this ship, and I think if you can strike the balance in the Fubuki, then it will bode you well for other Japanese destroyers that you'll sail out in. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.